guys, I am not very good at these types of videos, so bear with me. My paper topic, it was women of the Old Testament with God-given authority. And it's kind of interesting that I chose that topic because I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion regarding women in ministry, or had, past tense, which is why I kind of wanted to write this paper to just dig deeper. And I have grown up under the belief and teachings that women should not have any kind of authority over man spiritually. And so I kind of grew up with that lens in the way that I thought and the way that I saw ministry. And as I've gotten older, I have realized that's not necessarily the case. Rather than women being below men, or women not being capable of doing everything a man can do, there is, we are completely equal to man in the authority that we're able to have with the Lord, but the way that it translates is so differently. It's very different. And so while men and women are equal, we have these God-given differences in us. And that translates in every part of our lives. It translates in our home. It translates with our children. It translates the way that we talk, the way that we feel, the way that our minds work. The differences between men and women are so apparent in every aspect of our lives. And I think that that also translates into ministry and the authority that God gives us. God may give us the same authority, but it's going to be expressed differently. And when I was kind of studying this, God revealed that to me. We are completely, as women, equal to man and able to hold the same authority that man has. But we are inherently different, and it's beautiful differences. They're amazing differences, and that should also translate into our ministry and the way that we reach people and the way that we handle God-given authority. It's just different from men, whether we like it or not. And I've highlighted that here in my paper. So, women of the Old Testament with God-given authority. So women in authority is biblical, as I said, with scriptural reference or evidence being based on several examples explicitly pertaining to women in positions of decision-making and leadership roles. Throughout God's word, we see God can and does entrust women with the authority it entails. He gives it directly to women and wives. God can and does speak to women without using a man all throughout the Bible. Christian women should have a major role in evangelizing and should be able to serve because they share the same objective as Christian men do, which is to fulfill the Great Commission. Some would even argue that women, because of their naturally submissive nature, are softer towards God, and as a result, are more available to Him when He gives that call or command to go or to do. This paper examines this argument and provides scriptural reference to support this belief. So in the time that the Bible was written, most cultures were either majority patriarchal or majority matriarchal. And what's interesting about the Bible and the Old Testament is that it includes both patriarchs and matriarchs among the founding fathers of the nation of Israel, which I thought was pretty cool. Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and his two wives, Leah and Rachel. They're all examples of couples that are frequently used in the Bible. And while the Bible does include stories of women being oppressed or women being less than men, it never supports that belief. It just includes it so that we can understand the context of the scriptures being written. So it's actually interesting to me that any time in the Bible a woman is treated as property or treated poorly, it ends terribly for every man involved, which just, again, proves to me that the Bible was not in support of inequality. It just included those stories for us to better understand the writings and teachings of the Bible. So when we read the Old Testament, it's important for us to see that these stories were written by men. And the male perspective, they did have the lens, the cultural lens of their time. And the male perspective provided little information about the actual thoughts and feelings of the women. So this paper just discusses really the different qualities expressed in the Bible of women who had authoritative roles. It discusses similarities and differences between the women in the Bible with authority. The first example that I give is Deborah, which we all know. She was the famous woman judge of Israel. She was one of the most significant biblical ladies. Judge Deborah was reputed to be a prophet who could both hear and speak God's voice. She served as a priestess, which was interesting, and she led worship, which is very intriguing because men and priests of that time, they made sacrifices, right? But God called her to be a priestess, and rather than having her make a sacrifice, he had Deborah lead worship rites, which was interesting. And it just kind of highlighted to me that both Deborah was a judge just like any other man of Israel, but rather than having her make sacrifices like he did the men, he had Deborah lead worship rites. And that's just another example of the equality, but the difference, which I thought was really interesting. The second example that I listed in my paper is that of Esther. I listed Esther, and while she wasn't necessarily a spiritual leader, she was entrusted with incredibly important decision making within God's people, the body of God's people. And so I thought that was interesting to me because she wasn't necessarily the same as Deborah. She was not a priestess. She just was entrusted with a large responsibility at the center, the root, the heart of God's people. And this story proves to me today that women do have what it takes to make the proper decisions regarding God's people and to be entrusted with important roles and important decisions. And then next, I talked about Jael. You can find her acts of authority in Judges 4, 17 through 24 and 5, 24 through 27. So the story of Jael is very different, and I had heard of it, but I had never really studied it before the writing of this paper. And what's interesting to me is that she was kind and hospitable, right, to the man that she was going to kill. She had ulterior motives, of course, while doing this, but after Sisera had eaten well and was asleep in her tent, Jael took a tent peg and a mallet and snuck up on him and placed the tent peg in the temple of his head and hit the peg with a mallet, driving it through his temple, and killed him. And I thought that was crazy because the honor of killing, so Deborah prophesied that the honor of killing the captain of Jabin's army would go to a woman, and it did. That woman was Jael. And so what was interesting to me was she defeated the enemy in war totally differently than a man ever would. She was hospitable. She welcomed him into her tent. She fed him. She made sure he was comfortable. And then she defeated him. And that was just kind of cool to me because, again, we see that when a woman is being entrusted and doing something that at the time only a man should do, but she did it in such a unique way that really only a woman could do. So that was just kind of a cool story I wanted to include. And then I spoke about Ruth a little bit, really just trying to highlight the attributes of leadership shown by women in the Old Testament. For example, Deborah showed uniqueness of a woman priest. Esther showed the uniqueness of a bold and trusted leader. Jael showed the uniqueness of the role women have to play and the strength that they have and Ruth show the uniqueness of dedication. So thank you, and if you want to read the rest of my paper, just let me know.